Welcome to Toxic Superfoods Exposed. Today we delve into the life of Rick Huse, a seasoned trainer whose journey through health challenges reveals unexpected truths.
So I realized now, looking back, that everything that happened from that point on was most likely caused by the massive amount of oxalates I was taking in.
It was a journey fraught with pain and despair, culminating in a life-changing discovery.
My name is Rick Huse. I'm a 76-year-old trainer. I've been a trainer for over 40 years. I had two other careers before that. 2000, I became one of the first kettlebell instructors in the country. I became a master kettlebell trainer in 2012. It was Valery Fedorenko, 10-time world champion, gave me that title. My health situation is very complex. There's a lot of autoimmune type issues, and most of the things that have happened to me in the last 40 years has been diagnosed as idiopathic. The doctors couldn't find any cause. It started around 1980 when I changed my diet, and I realized now, looking back, that's when I increased my oxalate intake by a lot. My family doctor recommended that I start taking about 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. And it sounded like a lot, but this was the time period of Linus Pauling and the Nobel Prize that he won for his work on vitamin C. So it was a big thing at that time. And my doctor said, well, don't worry about the 3,000. What you don't use, you'll pee out. It should have been a red flag. But anyway, I found out by listening to Sally that ascorbic acid or vitamin C is a precursor to making oxalates in the body. And about that time too, I was trying to increase my vegetable intake to be healthier. So I realized now, looking back, that everything that happened from that point on was most likely caused by the massive amount of oxalates I was taking in. My doctor was my age. My wife was his nurse. So I was treated like family. When I came into the office, I got special care, I got special attention. One of the things that happened was I noticed a nodule on my thyroid had popped up from out of nowhere. He stood behind me and felt it. He ordered one of the older doctors to do it, and they panicked. And I realized they weren't saying it out loud, but they probably thought I had thyroid cancer. So instead of sending me to an endocrinologist, they sent me to a general surgeon. I'm just following instructions, and I'm following whatever the doctors tell me. They did a needle biopsy, and the results came back suspicious but unknown. That's not acceptable if cancer's a possibility. So he wanted to go in and take a slice of it, as he told me, freeze it, look at it, and see if he found any cancer cells. Well, I went through that. When I woke up, he was standing in front of me holding a bottle of Synthroid, which is artificial for thyroid, for T4. Then the report came back, suspicious but unknown. So he couldn't prove it was cancer. He took it out thinking that it was. So now the rest of my life, I'm on thyroid medicine. During that time period, I was having problems with the urinary tract, and I was up at night all night long, having some problems bothering my wife because I was waking her up. And I went in and out of urologists for the next maybe 16 years, going up, taking cystos and not finding anything. If you have urinary tract problems, the low-hanging fruit for the doctor is to convince or to say you have a prostate issue. And it's probably a deeply embedded infection. So we have to give you a very powerful antibiotic for a long period of time to try to kill this infection that we can't see or identify. So anybody that knows anything about the gut biome, that kind of use of antibiotics is going to tear your biome apart. It set me up for a yeast overgrowth. So now I had a yeast problem. So I'm in and out of urologists, going back and forth with yeast and this thyroid treatment. Finally, in 1998, I woke up one morning in incredible pain. I've never felt anything like that. And I panicked because I didn't know what was going on. It was coming from the bladder. I finally got referred out to one of the founders of the practice, who I'd seen about 10 years before, and he couldn't find anything, but he was my last resort. So I had 2 weeks to sit around and think about, am I going to see another urologist that's going to tell me they can't find anything, and here's your antibiotics, and here we go again. I wasn't sleeping. I was depressed. And I came home one day from work early and I lay down on the couch with the dogs. And I really thought about suicide at that time. And my wife came home and I said, I need to tell you this because I don't want you to take this personally, but I don't think I can continue living this way. She got me in the car and we were at the stress center probably within a half hour. And I visited with a psychiatrist who said, I don't think you're suicidal. You're really tired and I can see that you're depressed. So let's get you some sleep. And oh, by the way, the urologists aren't helping you. This is a neurological problem. You need to see a neurologist who I'd seen before when they thought I had MS but couldn't prove it. So I got in right away to see this guy. He was one of the founders of the practice. And we talked for a while and he said, I don't know what you got, but the nerve pain you're describing is the same thing we deal with diabetics and neuropathy. So he started me on gabapentin, but I had to titrate that up. So with a little extra sleep and the pain being reduced, I started feeling better. And I walked into the doctor's office, who that was going to be my last shot. And I sat down at the table across from him. He was looking at the urology report, and he went like this. Oh. Then he said he was looking right at it, but he didn't know what he was looking at, referring to the last doctor. He said, you got interstitial cystitis. That moment was a relief in my mind because now we had a name. And anytime I've been diagnosed with something before with a name, you've got a treatment or cure coming. Before I even completed that thought in my head, he said, we don't know what causes it, and there is no cure. He said, the best we can do is control your pain, and you're already on gabapentin. It's not our first choice, but no reason to start over again. And we know food has something to do with it, so let's walk down the hall and talk to our nutritionist. So I walk in, and she said, well, we think it's acid in foods that's irritating the bladder. So we got to reduce your acid intake and build up your alkaline. And she gave me a list of foods. I'm disciplined as a trainer, health addict. Tell me to do something, give me a good reason to do it, I'll do it. High on that list of oxalate foods are spinach, almonds, and almost everything else was high in oxalates. So not only did the vitamin C cause the problem, but now what they gave me, besides the stupid antibiotics, was now making it worse. But I didn't know what else to do, so I stayed with that program. You see the humor of this after a while, because it was just idiotic. I was experimenting with the plant paradox, who was after lectins. And Gundry didn't say anything about oxalates, but he did mention that plants are not your friends, but he was still saying you still need to eat them, or some of them. So I tried to increase his version of what to eat. After about 6 months, I lost some weight, didn't feel any better, and the bladder symptoms were probably worse. So I went back to what did I do in the past? So I looked at the paleo diet for autoimmune issues. That lasted about a month, and I decided to try keto, but that didn't help either. But I noticed, besides the symptoms, I was starting to get itching in my arms and my lower legs. And in November, I heard some podcasts by Paul Saladino and Sean Baker. And listening to the two of them, I was convinced that maybe I should go on the carnivore diet. It was the last resort. I've tried everything else. It was the ultimate elimination diet. And I started losing some weight pretty rapidly. But about a month or so after that, I started itching on the forearms and the lower legs. And I thought I had a food allergy, which is really horrible when you're on only beef, because there's not a whole lot of choices to look at. So I contacted an allergist. I made an appointment with a local nurse practitioner who was certified in functional medicine, told her what was going on, told her what I wanted. So she added a couple things to the blood test, and all came back negative. All the blood tests she ordered also came back negative. There was nothing for her to treat. I was still listening to podcasts, still trying to search for the keto rash, what might be causing the symptoms. And along the list came Sally K. Norton talking about oxalates. My wife had kidney stones. I've never had them. I thought, okay, I'll listen to it. Can't hurt. So about a half an hour into it, I listened to her story. And I said, this sounds awfully familiar. She's been treated by a lot of doctors, a lot of pain, a lot of frustration, and no help. So the interviewer doing his job said, well, if someone thinks they might have an oxalate problem, what kind of symptoms would they be looking for? And she said, well, we're just talking about urinary tract. So let's think about that for a second, kidney stones. But then you've worked down the urethra and you're looking into the, the bladder. And then you go out the exit, you've got vulvodynia. And I thought, well, for men, the prostate's in that tract as well. So there's the problem. And she's actually said the term interstitial cystitis, which is so incredibly rare to hear that anytime. It snapped my head back. I was driving and I went, whoa, I need to pay attention to this even more. And I listened to the rest of it, and that started me listening to Sally Kay's interviews at that time over and over again, picking up more details each time I listened. And I even lasted through all of her story, because even when she went through her medical history, she would change it a little bit and pick up something new. After about 3 or 4 months on that, I decided to join a group session. I needed some more help. Things weren't working well. I didn't feel well. I was tired. Symptoms were not going away like I thought they would. Then I decided, well, I really needed a consultation one-on-one. So I wrote a one-page detailed letter about what I was going through. I didn't really expect to hear back because I knew she was busy, but within a couple of days, I got a letter saying, or an email back saying, yeah, let's do that. And then she contacted me about doing the interview for the book release. That was almost 2 hours of interview. And right at the tail end of it, the producer was wrapping up. We were still talking. And I mentioned I was still having problems with the release and feeling crappy. At which time she said, well, almost reluctantly, she has said, it's an 8 to 10 year process. Given the fact that we both had a similar history of large volume of oxalates for a long period of time. So it's going to take a while to clear it out. But she added something that I had never heard before. She said, but years 2 and 3 are the worst. I was about 3 months away from finishing year 2. And I thought, year 3 can't be any worse than what I went through. I was wrong. I was really wrong. And I'm at the tail end of that. I just finished year 3 about a month ago. The bladder's calming down. I'm not sure whether it's running out of oxalates to get rid of, or whether it's a combination of the drugs I'm on and that. It's bringing me more to a quiet point. But when Sally said that years 2 and 3 are the worst, I felt rather ill at ease about talking about this on a video, because I don't want to scare people off from investigating oxalates in their life. But it's something they have to recognize as a possibility that they're going to trip over this someplace in the future. And I've listened to her when she's talked to people about the clearing aspect more in detail, and that's come up, that these are going to come in phases. And it's going to come, it's going to go. You don't know where the body's going to release it or why, but in time, it's going to lessen. I made a mistake at the beginning of not having the book, of not understanding a lot of what Sally was talking about. As she got later into easing in to backing down off of oxalates, I think a lot of people that started with carnivore ended up where I did, with a lot of problems, because it was just quit. And also the body started to go into a dump. And that increases the symptoms that you're facing and maybe creating some new ones as well. So the advice would be is to listen carefully to a lot of the podcasts. I think you can learn a lot by hearing the story over and over again. Read the book and take the part seriously about how to back down, so that you go into this more gently instead of landing on it with both feet as I did and crashing. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But eventually you're going to have to deal with the fact you've got oxalates. And you have to think about this in terms of long term. This is going to take a while. And you have to be patient and understand the body's going to be going through its processes. Just don't make it worse. You kind of have to trust the body in what it's trying to do if you help it. You hurt it by dumping too much or cutting fast, too soon, and then going back on your diet and interrupting that process when you were on the right path, but you just quit. So those are two things that you probably shouldn't do.